Okay, now we are going to discuss the book compiled by Most Venerable Katukurunde Jnanananda Mahathero. It's called Concept and Reality in Early Buddhist Thought. I hope someone is ready with the reading of the book so that we can read from where we have stopped. So then we can continue from that
there?
on. Yeah, from there. Actually,
Okay,
now actually Venerable Jnanananda Thero give a detailed explanation about some close analysis into Madhupindika Sutta, that particular passage where the generation of the Papancha, or we can say the genesis of the Papancha, how it is happening. And he is beautifully dividing into three pieces or three stages. And after we going through this passage, probably we can use our diagram. Last time also we have shown that so that we can thoroughly understand what's really going on. Maybe now someone can start reading, please.
yeah. Avasarapante.
Yeah.
Equipped with these definitions, we may now examine the Madhupindika formula of sense perception in detail. It begins on an impersonal note, reminiscent of the fact of dependent arising, paticca samuppada. Chakkunchauso paticca rupecha uppajjiti chakku viññānam, tinnan sangati passo, passa paccaya vedana. Because of eye and material objects, O brethren, arises visual consciousness. The meeting of the three is sensory impingement. Because of sensory impingement arises feeling. The impersonal note is sustained only up to the point of Vedana. The formula now takes a personal ending suggestive of deliberate activity. Yam vedeti tam sanjanati. Yam sanjanati tam vitakketi. Yam vitakketi tam papancheti. What one feels, one perceives. What one perceives, one reasons about. What one reasons about, one proliferates conceptually. The deliberate activity implied by the third person verb is seen to stop at papancheti. Now comes the most interesting stage of the process of cognition. Apparently, it is no longer a mere contingent of processes, nor is an activity deliberately directed, but inexorable subjection to an objective order of things. At this final stage of sense perception, he who has hitherto been the subject now becomes the helpless object.
Hapless object.
Hapless object. Yam papancheti tato nidanam purisam papanya sanya sankha samudacharenti atitanagata pachupannesu chakku viññeyesu rupesu. What one proliferates conceptually, due to that, concepts characterized by the prolific tendency assail him in regard to material shapes cognizable by the eye, belonging to the past, the future, and the present. Like the legendary resurrected tiger which devoured the magician who restored it to life out of its skeletal bones, the concepts and linguistic conventions overwhelm the worldling who evolved them. At the final and crucial stage of sense perception, the concepts are, as it were, invested with an objective character. This phenomenon is brought about mainly by certain peculiarities inherent in the linguistic medium.
Okay, just wait a moment, Saman. Probably you can show the diagram so that we can explain a little bit further.
Yeah, 1 second, Mante. I have to grab that.
Hope you can see it, Saman.
Yes, we can see it, Mante.
Yeah. So actually, as depicted in this diagram, so we can see clearly some three stages in this whole process. the first process, or the first stage is where kind of a causal reaction going on, and which is common to everyone. And eye, when it is sort of aligning with the form, when the eyesight is there, then the eye consciousness arises. So this is a kind of a causal action happening. Chakkuncha paticca rupecha uppajjati chakku viññāna. The chakku viññāna, the eye consciousness arises because eye and form come in line. Eye is open and healthy, and there is enough illumination, and form is in front of it. And as a result of that, the eye consciousness happen. And now, with the explanation is actually given by Venerable Mahakaccana in the Madhupindika Sutta. So there he then mentioned Chakkuncha paticca rupecha uppajjati chakku viññāna tinnan sangati passu. Now these three now happens very much almost like simultaneously. Even though eye consciousness is a result or the baby of the eye and the form, but again and again when this process happens, it appears like these three phenomena are available simultaneously. So the contact going to happen when these three are continuously happening, continuously available, when they are coming together. That is called the contact, the passa. Passa paccaya vedana. So now the feeling comes to the position. So now till this position, till Vedana, till feeling, actually this causal reaction has happened. From that point onwards, the person interacts. So you have seen now, as a result of that sight, there is a kind of a pleasurable feeling. Say let's talk it as a pleasurable feeling. Now pleasurable feeling arises. Now you are interacted. Now you are being triggered. Your sense perception are now somewhat triggered. Now you want to recognize what you have felt. Yang vedeti tang sanjanati. So you need to recognize what you have felt. So now the perception comes to be. Perception. Sanjanati. Now they are in the sort of the verb form. Now you are doing it. You are participating in the action. You are the one doing it. Yang vedeti tang sanjanati. Yang sanjanati tang vitakketi. So what you have recognized, now you are thinking about it. Because you need to properly understand, you want to match it with the previous experience. So now you are thinking. Now still this thinking is happening within your knowledge, or within your mindfulness, we can say. Yang vedeti tang sanjanati, yang sanjanati tang vitakketi, yang vitakketi tang papancheti. So that papancheti, actually in this diagram I have to make a little correction. So to some extent that papancheti part is also belongs to stage 2. But later in the third stage, papancha sanya sanka samudacharanti happens. So that is the stage actually most interesting, as Katapunde Thero is mentioning. So the previous level, that multitude of thinking, is my own type of thinking. I want to think about the past. I want to think a little bit about the future. Present moment also I want to think from different directions. So I am the one somewhat sort of initiating the thinking process. I am the one starting multi-directional thinking because I want to consider many aspects. So that's why I say in a meeting, so we often say, okay, you need to think about many directions. You can't simply think about in one aspect, but there are many influential factors. So we need to think on many influential factors, many other directions. So now actually a kind of thinking process being ignited, thinking process being somewhat stimulated, somewhat started. But the last stage 3 is where, so now the person who started that thinking has become a slave of that very thinking. He has sailed to their thinking. So that's the third stage, where thinking has gone beyond his control. Now overthinking happens, so obsessive thinking happens, or we call it as conceptual proliferation happens. now that particular person can't stop it. So that person has become a kind of a victim of that very thinking process. So that's what we want to understand. So there are these three different stages we can recognize. The first stage is very much very kind of a causal reaction common to everyone. Then the second stage is where we as a person participate into the process and we start thinking. That is where we come to kind of thought processes, and ultimately that thinking very much like getting overdosed, getting overwhelmed, and it reaches its ends, surpassing our control, and ultimately we become a victim of that very thinking. That is the level called as the papancha. That is the level called as the multi-directional or manifold kind of thinking, kind of a diffusion, obsession happens in the mind. So there we are helpless. We are helpless actually. So that we are helpless, and basically we are in a slave type of a state. Okay, now we can get in back to the book.
Yeah, Bhante.
Yeah. I can't stop, by the way. So can you try to share?
Yeah, I did. Can you see the screen, Bhante?
Yes, sure, I can.
Okay, right. Then I'll start again. As a symbolical medium, language has an essential public quality about it. The public quality has necessitated the standardization of the symbols, words, as well as of the patterns of their arrangement, grammar, and logic. And these, therefore, enjoy a certain degree of stability. Thus, the letter, as the smallest unit of language, was called akshara, stable, durable, and language itself was associated with God and eternity by the ancient Indian philosophers. Now, the vague percepts, which are already tainted with the notion of stability owing to the limitations of the sensory apparatus, become fully crystallized into concepts in the realm of ideation, nouns, abstract nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs. In short, the whole repertoire of language assumes a certain substantial character by virtue of its relative stability. It is probably this particular phenomenon that is hinted at by such oft-recurring phrase in the suttas as tamassa, paramassa,
Tamasa parama abhinivissa paranti.
Tamasa paramasa abhivinissa voharanti.
Yeah, tamasa paramasa abhinivissa voharanti.
Tamasa paramasa abhivinissa voharanti. Having seized tenaciously and adhering thereto, they declare, and takka pariyahata, hammered out on the anvil of logic, as it were, cited in Bhante?
Yeah, anvil of logic, yes.
Anvil of logic, as it were, cited in connection with dogmatic theories, which themselves are called Ditthijala, vertitable networks of weaves. The vicious proliferating tendency of the wordlings, consciousness weaves for him a labyrinthine network of concepts connecting the three periods of time through processes of recognition, retrospection, and speculation. The tangled maze with its apparent objectivity entices the wordlings and ultimately obsesses and overwhelms him. The Buddha has compared the aggregate of consciousness to a conjurer's trick or an illusion, Maya, and we may connect it with the above-mentioned image of resurrected tiger.
Okay, Now, actually, this resurrected tiger, so that's a very interesting story. So you all might have heard about it. So there are three magicians. They are wandering in the forest, and they come across a dead tiger. And now they want to test their caliber. They want to test their skill. So one magician says, okay, I can connect all the bones scattered here and there. I can connect and very much prepare the whole skeleton. Because, after a long time, all the skeleton become sort of dissected into little pieces, and those are scattered. So one magician has taken the challenge to connect the whole thing so that the complete skeleton is available. Okay, now the other magician says, okay, now I will fill all the parts, the muscles, the veins, all the other bodily parts. So I'm going to fill everything so that it almost appear like a dead tiger right now. Just now it has died, very much like that. So that everything appears like alive except the life. Now the third one takes the challenge to give the life. Now this is a kind of a folk story, interesting one. So third one takes the challenge, okay, I am going to give him the life, give it the life. So because of its magic power, now it is giving him the power. Now the tiger is alive. Now once tiger is alive, so it actually killed all three magicians. So that's the folk story. What Katakurunda Thero is taking here. So the point here is, so we humans are the ones actually generating this whole language. So we are the ones coming up with various ideas, coming up with the letters, as mentioned, akshara, all these letters. So as Sinhalese, we start with ayanna, ayanna, yanna, yanna. So likewise, we are very much learning that. As English, A, B, C, D. So all these things we are learning in our kindergarten or in our first grade. So we are learning all these things. And everyone has to kind of follow the same alphabet. Everyone has to refer the same alphabet. Everyone has to pronounce it properly on the same way. So there's a kind of a common recognition there. It's a kind of a convention that we are now following. So everybody has to recognize letter A as letter A. So its shape is very much fixed. Letter A has a fixed shape. Everybody has to write, either you are in Sri Lanka, or either you are in England, or either you are in Australia. So we all have to follow a kind of a strict rule how to represent letter A. Now that means letter A is fixed. Its shape is fixed. And how to pronounce it is also fixed. And various words now we are coming up with. So that is also fixed. And the meaning of those words are also fixed. And now we learn grammar. So that is also fixed. So everybody has to accept, okay, this is how everybody has to follow. So this is how a statement has to write down. So this is where the noun, this is where the adjective, this is where the verb. So we come to a kind of a convention, kind of a common acceptance. So how this linguistic grammar and all that related to that coming to being. So you can see the language plays a significant role in this way of understanding. And again, in that sense, so people have gone too far, as Katakurunda Thero is pointing out. So they even think language is very much like a god. So they are putting it to a very higher level, God and eternity, by the ancient Indian philosophers. So this is not only the ancient Indian philosophers, even today. So when we learn a language, when we are so bound to that, when we are taking it so serious and we love that language, and there are different areas are available, maybe literature, maybe grammar, this and that are available, and certain people love some area, another person love another area. So using language, we can write poems, we can write lyrics, we can compile songs, many things are there. So now we start loving that, we start gives more importance to that. But it is a convention. We forget that ultimately. So all what language represent, all what grammar represent, all what words, statements represent, to us, they become very solid. They become very stable. They become very fixed something. So we are making things now. So as pointed out here, now we are tamasa paramasa abhinivissa voharanti. So now we are very much like having seized tenaciously. So we are strongly holding it. Tamasa paramasa. So paramasa means strongly holding. We are adhering to it. Strongly holding. Tamasa, very powerful holding. Paramasa, tamasa paramasa abhinivissa. And we are adhering to that. We are going into that. So we are living in that. Strongly attached to that. Strongly clung to that. Grasping that. So you can see how many people are killing each other for a language. Say in Sri Lanka, so many languages are used. Say Sinhala language, Tamil language, English language. So we are having at least 3 main languages. So if someone says, okay, only Sinhalese language has to be the best language, common language, so then many others are there to oppose that. So if one say, okay, we need to give due recognition to Tamil language, there are many portions, Sinhala portions may be objecting that. Someone says, no, we have to take English language as the government language, official language. So many others are there, come forward and they will object that. It was like that now we have sort of taken language to a very fixed, stable kind of a ideation. So things are fairly collected in our mind. We are thoroughly adhered to that. We have our likes and dislikes. We have our own preference to that. So that's why it is mentioned. Tamasa paramasa abhinivissa voharanti. So we are voharanti. We are using it. We are basically using the language to talk to each other, to communicate to each other, but with a thorough, strong adherence. Not taking it lightly. Not understanding its purpose. We forget the purpose of the language. Rather, we thoroughly adhere to the language. We strongly hold the language and we are using it for communication. So this is what typically happens. So ultimately, as Katakurunde Thero pointed out, so that very language, that very convention, all the concepts included in that language are ultimately consume the user. So we are the ones who generated it. We are the ones who established the grammar, the rules, the words, statements, everything. The humans are the ones, the man-made is the everything. But the very man has become a victim of that. His man-made language. So he is a kind of a slave to that language. He can kill another human being because of the language. So he becomes so overwhelmed by that. He's taking it so seriously. He's giving additional importance to that, forgetting about its purpose. So therefore, to our entanglement, all different kind of thinking, conceptual proliferation, so we can see language plays a pivotal role. So we are used to a language, we are using a language, we are learning language from our childhood, and that language has considerably conditioned the mind. So we can't stop using a language. So then we think, okay, we are like barbarians who don't have kind of a knowledge, you don't have literacy. So that is what we appreciate. Knowing several languages is kind of a honorific title. But on the other hand, when we are strongly adhered to that, and that is how we are thinking. So our way of thinking, how we behave, everything has a great influence coming from our language and how we are using our language. And now we are strongly adhered to that language. And when we are using our senses, immediately language comes to the front. Say, we are seeing a bicycle. So immediately there's a term, kind of a term used to recognize bicycle from a car. A typical foot bicycle from a motor bicycle and a car. So there are different names given to distinctly recognize all these things. Now we are recognizing it and immediately we add that label. We are adding a label to that recognize whatever the object. So everything become very much like objectified. So everything becomes so solid. Everything becomes so permanent because we have seen it. We remember the name given. We remember the title given. We remember the verb given, action given. We remember the linguistic characters and everything given. So that actually has sort of implanting kind of a permanence in our mind. So we have a bicycle now, a noun now. Like some kind of an object is now available. Now say for example, raining happens. So raining is a kind of an activity going on, but the language can make raining as a noun. Rain. Rain is a noun. Raining is a verb. So if we a little bit think about it, we can understand, okay, there is no something called rain apart from the raining. So it's an action. Now this ongoing action, but we have somewhat objectified. We have put it to a something. We have put it into a cage and we call it as a heavy rain. We call it as a minor rain. So likewise, we can actually give names to everything. Nowadays, people are very clever in doing that. Even a tornado comes, they give a name to that tornado. Even a cyclone comes, they give a name to that cyclone. Even, say, any kind of a whirlpool comes, then they give a name to that whirlpool. So they are, asking even questions. What is the name of the tornado happened 2014? What is the name of the cyclone happened in 2020? So likewise, because now people have made them so solid. So it is something. So cyclone is not a something, it is a kind of a phenomenon going on, kind of an action has happened. But we as humans have given kind of a position to that, a designation to that, a name to that, and we have given an importance to that. And we have solidified that. So it has become something in our kind of a cognition. So now that has made this conceptual proliferation so intense. So we are now prone to think too much. So we are thinking too much because things are so permanent. So for us, everything appear like so permanent. So language give a great influence to think like that. So everything appear like permanent. So rain is something, tornado is something, cyclone is something, and they are objects. Now we can think about it. Now we can think, or we can be afraid of it, we can imagine about it, we can proliferate about it. So in a way, so language plays a big role in this whole conceptual proliferation. And on the other hand, language plays a big role in our too much thinking, obsessive thinking. So you can understand actually mind-made or human-made concepts ultimately consume the human. So we as humans have made so many concepts, so many conventions, but we are the one ultimately being very much like surrendered to that, enslaved to that. We can't stop thinking about them. We are very much like now has become a victim of that very concepts. We need concept. Of course, actually even now we are using concepts to communicate, even to understand what has happened to us. So we need concepts. We are using a language, English language, we are using it. So our time talking, you can understand through the concepts necessary. But the interesting part is, as Thero is highlighting, it is not that we are trying to deny the concepts, We are using the concepts ultimately to understand the real purpose of the concepts, and ultimately even to slowly abandon the concepts, so that one day, say you have a mind free from conceptual proliferation, where you have stopped obsessive thinking, where you have stopped overthinking, where you have come to a kind of a interesting inner silence. So these are very interesting things. So that's why we want to sort of discuss these points a little bit in detail, somewhat intellectual way, as Katakunda Thero has pointed out. You can see in the Buddha's teaching, so how these very interesting things are profoundly explained. Because otherwise we can't even appreciate the Buddha's teaching unless we discuss these kinds of, say, very interesting, very important, very profound parts. Otherwise we simply think, okay, what Buddha taught is kind of a rituals and some precepts, so we need to adhere to them, we need to go to the temple and we need to simply do those rituals, so that is what Buddha has taught. So we don't know what's the depth of it. But when we are discussing like this, using various sources like these books, so we can see what a beauty of the Dhamma that Buddha has taught. So what a depth is available there. And how we become, unfortunately, we become a kind of victim of the very things what we have made. So mind-made concepts ultimately make the very people, very humans, under his sort of arms, under its influence, under its strength. So the humans are then quarreling each other, hitting each other, killing each other, just for a convention, just for a language. Language is there just for a communication, but now we are attributing it to a so-called mighty thing, and it's a so-called God, putting it at a very God level. Now we can even kill another human being just for the language. So this is what actually has happened to us. So I think we can stop there. And again, as Katakunda Thero is pointing out, Buddha in another sutta, it's called Pena Pindupama Sutta. There Buddha points out how consciousness does everything like a magician. So what is not available, it can show as available. What is available, it can say it is not available. It's like a complete magician. It can make a huge kind of a thing out of nothing. It can make something available, but intrinsically there is nothing available. So likewise, the Mayupamancha Vijnana. So the consciousness appear like a Maya, appear like a illusion, like a magic of a magician. So we'll conclude here, and we can further go ahead from next week. So now I like to open the session for questions, and you can participate in the discussion.
Avasarai Bante, we have 4 questions today.
Right.
Question number 1 of 4. This is on mindful sitting. Dear Bante, I am very, very grateful for your guidance. In my personal experience, the body scan and its calming effect rapidly makes me aware of the sound of silence. I recall that one of my questions on the sound of silence, i.e. if I should use it as an object of meditation, Bante advised me not to use the sound of silence for meditation, but just keep it in the periphery of my awareness and pay attention to the breath. Could Bante please explain to me the reason for the selection of breath, which is a cyclic change in sensation as opposed to sound of silence and the body scan, which are constant sensations, i.e. not cyclically changing? Are change in sensations such as footfall and breathing superior to constant or static sensations? That's the end of the question.
So superior. Interesting, by the way. So here also, I mean, we are trying to put some importance to certain concepts, and certain concepts we select. So in a way, it is true. So we are selecting certain concepts So ultimately, they give a kind of a thorough understanding. You know that the breath and all the other phenomena, say breath rising and falling, hardness, softness, various feelings, and sometimes we call them as phenomena, we call them as feelings, we call them as perceptions. Now they are all conditioned phenomena. So to Vipassana, what we are taking as the objects are the conditioned phenomena. So breath is such a conditioned phenomena. Rising and falling is such a conditioned phenomena. Various element characteristics are such conditioned phenomena. Feelings are such conditioned phenomena. Perceptions are such conditioned phenomena. Thoughts, emotions, intentions are all these conditioned phenomena. So these are the various areas we are using for our Vipassana. But on the other hand, the sign of silence is a result of our practice. So it is not consisting of any. It is also conditioned. We don't need to think that it is it is unconditioned. It is also conditioned, but relatively, it is quite easy to take certain phenomena which are practically easy to contemplate, practically easy to see their true nature. By seeing their true nature, our wisdom may grow. So sound of silence appear like kind of background. It appears in the background, and we are simply continuing our practice. So the interesting thing is, as we continue, so the inner silence may grow, and ultimately even the sound of silence can disappear. So we don't need to worry about sound of silence too much. So your questions appear like you are giving too importance to sound of silence. So later, the interesting thing is, as we are thoroughly understanding the true nature of various phenomena, so mind may sort of lifted up beyond those conditioned phenomena, and it get released, or it can experience as a kind of a temporary release. So while in the temporary release, sound of silence also you can hear, but that is not the important thing. So we are trying to make the mind release, not just because to hear the sound of silence. Rather, the mind has understood the conditioned nature of various phenomena, the impermanent nature of conditioned phenomena, or the suffering nature of conditioned phenomena, non-self nature of conditioned phenomena, non-governability of conditioned phenomena. So those are the disadvantages. Those are the danger. So by seeing that danger, okay, mind has let go of that. Mind has abandoned that. Letting go has happened. So mind has released. Because mind simply doesn't want to hold it anymore. So the release has happened. So that's why more we do that thorough investigation, it generates certain amount of wisdom. That wisdom helps us to abandon. Wisdom helps us to generate kind of a dispassion, and through that dispassion, okay, the relinquishment happens. So that's the typical formula that we are working on.
Question number 2 of 4. This is on mindful walking. Dear Bhante, when I do walking mindfulness practice, after 10 to 15 minutes, I get sleepy and lethargic. This happens all the time if I put substantial time and effort to the walking practice. I can still be aware of the impact of foot touching the ground, but there are no details in any of the sensations. I feel like a drunken sleepy man. However, if I hold on to the small amount of awareness I have without stopping, this feeling goes off after 10 to 15 rounds, and I come to a clear, energized, attentive mode again. Thought of informing Bhante and seek guidance if I need to adjust anything in the technique. With metta, that's the another question.
So while you are working, if you feel little tired by putting some intense attention to these phenomena, then better relax. Rather than putting too much energy, too much effort, you better release the mind. Allow it to, step back. Because sometimes at the beginning, actually, we need to thoroughly pay attention, closely pay attention, and to see the kind of the proper nature of that. It will show its true behavior. So now, as a result of that, now mind is growing or the wisdom is growing. So as wisdom is growing, so there is a natural detachment going to grow. So that has to happen, and we should not, forcefully again put it into the picture, forcefully again put our attention into the phenomena. Rather, we better allow the mind to somewhat relax, allow the mind to release, maintain a little distance. Previously, there was no much distance. It was closely, carefully associating, observing its true nature. But now, slowly, that distance is increasing. So mind is now looking at it more from a distant. It don't want to get involved. It don't want to get interfere. So at that moment, if you are trying to interfere or if you want to closely analyze, then you feel tired. Now, in yourself, you can see, so where are you, depending on how you feels like. So if you are carefully trying to do analysis, if you feel tiresome, then don't do that. Simply allow the mind to rest. On the other hand, mind itself is doing careful attention, careful observation, let it do that. Because it wants that learning curve. It's going through that investigation curve. So, and happily it is doing it. And that is also necessary. So we don't need to jump quickly to the release state. Rather, we need to sort of thoroughly learn from all these different phenomena. So let it go through that learning curve. I hope I answered the question.
So, question number 3 of 4. This is based on the Dhamma sermon. Dear Bhante, we have learnt a lot about Prapancha through your Dhamma sermon series these days. A small-scale Prapancha, which I understood as Vitakka Vichara, is used in a controlled manner to gain the concentration and insights in meditation practice. Bhante highlighted that after some time in mindfulness practice, we don't need Vitakka Vichara to just be aware of the present moment. Is it possible to understand and discern anything new without Vitakka Vichara? With metta. That's the end of the question.
Yeah. So actually, that's an interesting question. So the Vitakka Vichara has many different levels, we can say. So Vitakka Vichara in the gross level, we can say it is an inner chatter. Kind of a thinking is going on. So again and again, we are putting our attention to one aspect and somewhat examining that. We are putting our attention to another aspect and examining that. So kind of a thinking is going on. Internally, thinking is going on. Mind is involved in thinking. But on the other hand, there are, as you have pointed out, there are situations that we don't need to think. Basically, you have done thinking. Your analysis part is completed now. Now you want to relax. Now, if you have that capacity, when you want to think, okay, you have the freedom to think. But once you have thought about it, so why are you thinking further? We have to have the capacity. Okay, I don't need to think because I have thought about it. I found the solution. So let me keep the mind quiet. So at that moment, we can't say there is Vitakka Vichara. Rather, now we come to a kind of a clarity of the mind, kind of a transparency of the mind, stillness of the mind, because there is nothing to think. We understand, okay, no point of thinking now. Let me give a rest to the mind. Let me enjoy the silence. So at that moment, we can drop Vitakka Vichara. So therefore, point is that we can make use of Vitakka Vichara, and the gross level is inner chatter, and we can stop that, and we can use Vitakka Vichara effectively using meditation, like say we are applying our mind to a particular object like breath and observing that carefully. So that is the breath, the Vichara. So likewise, we are skillfully using Vitakka and Vichara during the meditation, and ultimately we come to a stage where we don't even want to do that. Let's keep the mind quiet. Keep the mind still. without making it somewhat, restless or shaky. Just relax. It's a kind of a, stage-wise process, stepwise process, a progressive stages that we are talking here.
Question number 4 of 4. This again a Dhamma sermon question. Dear Bhante, regarding the stage 1 of the process, I and form causes I consciousness, and these three together cause the contact. This seems quite aligned with our perception of existing I and existing form. I have heard that this process is happening in reverse as well, that there is no definite existing I and form. Appreciate if Bhante can comment if it is relevant here. With metta, that's the end of the question.
So that is also, okay. Now here we are talking of how a typical worldling is going through this whole thing, and we can't simply do what we are talking immediately. So there may be a situation, even though I is there, form is there, still conceptual proliferation does not happen. Thinking does not happen. Mind is not interested of thinking about it. So that may be possible. So at that time we can say Chakku Ayatana is not operating, and the Chakkayatana is not operating, and the Rupayatana is also not operating. So as a result of that, the other resultant parts are also not going to appear, so that there are the generation of too much thinking and its involvement, entanglement. So that is the various kinds of activities typically going on in the ayatana level. Chakkayatana, Rupayatana, Sotayatana, Saddayatana, Ghanayatana, Gandhayatana. So likewise, in the ayatana point of view. So they are like departments. They are like, kind of actively participating entities. So they dynamically, continuously do something. So we are geared to do something. So we can't simply stop by seeing. At the stage of seeing, we can't stop. We can't apply brakes. We are continuously thinking on this direction, that direction, and we are, very much like geared to think. So that is the ayatana level. But on the other hand, once we are able to stop that, that means it does not come to the ayatana level. It is merely very much like in certain suttas, there's a Kama Guna Sutta, Buddha mentioned Chakkuncha Nirujjati, Rupa Sanyacha Virajjati. Say ayatane veditabbe. So there may be a stage, Chakkuncha Nirujjati, so that the ayatana type of activity, type of active participation of the I is now nirujjati. It is now ceasing. Even though I is there, the function of seeing is very much like faded away. Even though your I is there, so the interested participation of the I. Typically, I wants to think. I in the means EYE wants to gratify. Ear wants to gratify. Nose wants kind of a set gratification. Tongue wants kind of a gratification. The body wants some kind of a gratification. So we are continuously trying to gratify our five senses or six senses. We are trying to gratify. So there may be a stage where that gratification is not necessary. Even though eye is there, even though ear is there, tongue is there, nose is there, body is there, mind is there. So now one is operating at a different level. So that is what Buddha is asking us to know. Where the cessation of these ayatanas are coming to the effect. Cessation is happening. Now you are waking up to a different level. Say ayatane vedidapa. You need to know that ayatana. You need to know that what we call the release of the mind. Kind of stillness of the mind. Not involvement of the mind. So that's an interesting area. So you can further explore that. where we are no more accumulating things through the eyes, through the ears. We are no more accumulating things. We are no more agitating the mind through the sensory impingements. So at that moment, we can say, okay, they are very much like cool, calm, relaxed. They are not partaking into anything, into this sensory, say, activities. Even though they are healthy, available, but their function is somewhat subsided.
So we've come to the end of the written questions. There's one person who's raised their hand. We have a few minutes, Bhante. I'll allow them to talk.
Okay.
Ashini, you can unmute yourself, I think.
Thero Sarnai, Swamin Hansa.
Yeah.
I have a problem of overthinking. I've been trying to overcome it for 2 years, but gradually it seems it's improving day by day. Although I have been meditating for 2 years now, it didn't cease. And I just did several kind of meditation also to stop that. But it seems that it is improving. Please help me to stop overthinking, Swami Hansa.
Yeah. I think the walking meditation would be the best answer. So, I mean, while walking, try to pay attention to the sensation. Say when your right foot is touching the ground, just try to pay attention to that sensation. When your left foot is touching the ground, pay attention to that sensation. So don't worry about thinking at that level. You can't immediately fight with the thinking, or you can't immediately confront thinking. Rather, what we are trying to do is kind of deviate our attention onto something useful. And we are improving our knowing capacity rather than the thinking proliferating capacity. So that's why that's a kind of a strategy here we are using in the walking meditation. So as much as possible, just walk barefooted. And when your right foot is touching, there is a gross sensation. Try to pay more attention to that. When your left foot is touching, just pay more attention to that. So that is one practical area where you can practice. So more and more your attention is fairly drawn to that, your mind is fairly concentrated to that. Probably you can now say, now the thinking has gone somewhat far away. Thinking is there, but not that strong. It has gone to the background. So that is one area you can understand. One area that you can involve with practically to reduce thinking. On the other hand, when thinking is going on, now say mind is thinking something useless. Probably you can understand, I mean, no point of thinking like this. Incident has happened. It already has happened. So you can't correct it now. And it has already gone. No point of regretting about it. Rather regretting about it, I can correct the mistake. Assume that you are regretting about a kind of a mistake you have done. So rather than regretting about it, one solution is you are correcting yourself. I am not going to do that mistake again. And I am not encouraging thinking, or I am not trying to accuse myself. I am not going to generate any kind of a self-hate. Rather, I am now trying to correct myself. Opportunity is available. So opening up is available. You are forgiving yourself. And without regretting, you are now trying to avoid doing the same mistake again. So that is another area you can start doing. And if there are any mistakes that you have done, just forgive yourself. Now, on the other hand, if you are planning too much about the future, that is also probably waste of time. Because we don't know what's really going to happen. It's utter waste of time if you are too much thinking, too much planning about this. So, likewise, you can use many mechanisms to reduce thinking, overthinking basically, so that you are experiencing some kind of a peace in your mind.
Thank you very much, Bhante. Merits for you. Thero Sarnai, Swami Hansa.
Yeah.
No, we have come to the end of the program. We only have about 2 more minutes. So I think we can end the program for today, Bhante.
Yeah, okay.
So to end the program, I would first like to thank Bhante for his valuable time, even with the busy schedule at the monastery. To all the supporters of this program, both seen and unseen, and to the participants for joining today to practice and share their questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thero Saranai,
Yeah.
Swami.
Yeah. Thero Saranai.